Mom, seriously, could you stop bringing that thing? My daughter's words cut through the cafe's buzz like sharpened knives. My heart shrank into a cold stone in my chest. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. If you also believe we still have value, even after 60, type 1 in the comments. And please leave a like and subscribe. Let's show them we're strong together. It was a Tuesday morning at the Corner Bean Cafe in Chicago. That place with warm yellow walls that always smelled of freshly ground coffee and pastries. I'd arrived 10 minutes early, as always, my hair carefully combed, wearing my navy blue blouse, the only one without a stain, and carrying that brown leather purse that had been with me for 30 years. The seams were split in places, the color faded by sun and use, but it was mine. It was part of me. "What thing, honey?" I asked, my voice trembling, though I already knew the answer. Jessica pointed at my purse with a look of disgust, as if it were something she'd found in the trash. "That purse! That filthy rag you've been dragging around for as long as I can remember. It's embarrassing, Mom." "Seriously?" The waiter, a young man in a white apron, stopped halfway between our table and the counter. His eyes shifted uncomfortably between my daughter and me, waiting for her to finish so he could take our order. I lowered my gaze to my wrinkled hands, which were clutching the purse on my lap like a protective shield. It was old, yes. The leather had cracked with the years, forming little lines that looked like wrinkles on an old face. The straps were worn from the thousands of times I'd carried it. To the market, to work, to Jessica's parent-teacher conferences, to the hospital when my husband got sick. But it was mine. It had been with me when I sold baked goods from a street cart downtown to pay for my daughter's private university. "Jessica, it's just a purse. I didn't come here to bother anyone," I murmured, feeling a lump form in my throat. She let out a sarcastic laugh, the kind she'd picked up in her expensive yoga and meditation classes, and rolled her eyes as if I were an annoying fly that had landed in her organic tea. "You don't get it, Mom. I'm meeting important people now. Successful people. I can't be seen with a woman who looks the way you do. It's bad enough I have to explain to my daughter why her grandma doesn't know how to use WhatsApp or Instagram." Every word was a stab that twisted somewhere deep in my soul. I, who had given my entire youth for this green-eyed girl who now looked at me like I was an unwelcome stranger. I, who went without my own dental work for 2 years to pay for the braces she wanted so badly. I, who lived on ramen noodles and canned soup for months so she could do that student exchange in Madrid she dreamed of. And now I was an embarrassment to her, a stain on her new, luxurious life. I glanced around the cafe. The other tables were occupied by women my age, some alone, others in small groups, all with purses similar to mine, all with stories written in the lines on their faces. Were their daughters ashamed of them too? Did they also carry the guilt of not having evolved into what their children considered acceptable? 2 black coffees, Jessica told the waiter without looking at me, as if I were invisible. And for me, make it with almond milk. I've been lactose intolerant since I started with my nutritionist. The young man nodded and hurried away, relieved to escape the tension that had settled over our table like an uninvited ghost. Jessica checked her phone, a brand new iPhone with a sparkly pink case, while I sat in silence, observing her perfectly manicured nails, her salon-fresh blonde hair, her designer clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. "And Chloe?" I finally asked, my voice a thin thread. "How is my granddaughter?" Jessica didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, she's fine, I guess. Although she told me she doesn't want you picking her up from school anymore. She's embarrassed her friends might think she's the cleaning lady's daughter." I felt as if my heart had been ripped from my chest with bare hands. Chloe, my little 6-year-old Chloe, with her messy pigtails and a laugh like tiny bells. The same little girl I took care of for 6 months when Jessica decided to go find herself at a yoga retreat in Sedona. The girl I bathed, fed, and rocked to sleep in my arms while her mother took space to reconnect with her essence. Tears began to burn behind my eyelids, but I swallowed them, just as I had learned to swallow everything else over the years. I dabbed my eyes discreetly with a cheap paper napkin, the kind that falls apart the moment you touch it. "Mom, don't start with the drama. Jessica sighed, finally looking up from her screen. You've always been like this. Over the top, melodramatic. If you can't handle this stage of your life, find a senior center or something. Do crafts. Learn to knit. I fell silent, feeling something deep inside me begin to fracture. But it wasn't my heart. It was something more dangerous. It was the infinite patience I had cultivated over decades. It was the capacity to forgive everything, to justify everything, to accept any humiliation just so I wouldn't lose the only people I had left in this world. What Jessica didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine in her wildest nightmares, was that inside that old purse she despised so much, I was carrying a sealed envelope, an envelope containing a check made out to me, with a figure I never thought I'd see written on a piece of paper. I had won the lottery, the real one, the kind that doesn't just give you money, but one last chance at redemption, one last card to play in this cruel game where I had always lost. And I had decided not to tell anyone. I wanted to see, for the first time in my life, who was who without them knowing what I carried in my despised old purse. The coffee arrived lukewarm, like my heart after so many years of disregard. I didn't touch mine. It just sat there, growing cold like all the conversations I had tried to have with Jessica in recent years. I just watched as she scrolled through her phone between sips of her almond milk latte, talking about dinners with business partners, her upcoming vacation in Tulum, her new boutique gym where a single class cost what I spent on food for a week. "Did I tell you Mark and I are looking at a house in Lincoln Park?" she said without looking up, as if commenting on the weather. "It's gorgeous, Mom. 5 bedrooms, a garden with a pool, and it's in a super exclusive area. Of course, it's expensive, but you know how these things are. You have to invest in your future." I nodded silently, remembering when she was 7 and we lived in a tiny rooftop apartment in Bridgeport. The winter nights when I would cuddle next to her under a threadbare blanket, promising her that one day we'd have a big house with a yard. I never imagined that when I was finally able to help fulfill that promise, by giving her the down payment for her current condo with my life savings, she would already be dreaming of something bigger, something where I no longer fit. "Mom, are you listening to me?" Her voice had that impatient tone she had perfected as a teenager, back when I worked double shifts cleaning offices to pay for her French and English classes. "Yes, honey. The house sounds lovely. Well, the only problem is we need to come up with the full down payment. You know how banks are now. They have so many requirements." Her voice trailed off suggestively, the way it always did when she needed money. It was a tone I knew all too well, the same one she used when she asked for money for her master's degree, for her honeymoon in Europe, for the new car when hers broke down. I looked at her perfectly manicured hands as she held the cup. Gel nails, rings that sparkled under the cafe lights, gold bracelets that had been my birthday gift to her last year, bought with the money I made selling the only pearl necklace my mother had left me. "How much do you need?" I asked, though the question came out automatically, like a conditioned reflex after 30 years of being my daughter's personal bank. "Not much, just $20,000. I know it's a lot, but think of it as an investment. When we sell the condo, I'll pay you back with interest." $20,000. The equivalent of 4 years of my full pension. The same amount it had taken me 5 years to save when I worked as a housekeeper in the suburbs, carrying grocery bags that weighed more than my hope, cleaning other people's bathrooms while my own was falling apart. I vividly remembered the day Jessica turned 16. I had worked for 6 months without a single Sunday off to pay for the sweet 16 party she so desperately wanted. A party in an elegant ballroom with an imported dress, a live band, and a 3-tiered cake that cost more than 2 months of my rent. That night, watching my daughter dance, surrounded by her friends, all from well-off families, I felt like the proudest woman in the world. But the next day, when I asked if she had enjoyed her party, she said, "It was okay, Mom. Though, honestly, the ballroom wasn't as nice as Sarah's, and the band was a little off-key." She never said thank you. "Jessica," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "do you remember when I worked at the Hendersons' house for 3 years to pay for your university?" She looked up from her phone annoyed. "Oh, Mom, not with your sob stories again. Yes, I know you worked hard. All mothers work. It's what they do. Do you remember I got pneumonia that winter and still went to work because I couldn't afford to lose the pay? Do you remember I was coughing up blood but wouldn't go to the doctor because the money was for your textbooks? Mom, she sighed, as if I were telling a bad joke. That was ages ago. Why do you keep living in the past? I've told you many times that I appreciate what you did, but it was also your obligation as a mother. I didn't ask to be born. Her words hit me like an invisible slap. I didn't ask to be born. Just like that, she dismissed 30 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of meals I skipped so she could eat in the university cafeteria like her wealthy classmates. I fell silent, watching her return to her phone, swiping through pictures of luxurious homes while I tried to process the coldness of her words. In that moment, my mind drifted to a specific night, 15 years ago. Jessica was 18 and had gotten a partial scholarship to study in Madrid for a semester. It was her dream, but the scholarship only covered half the expenses. She needed $5,000 for airfare, housing, and food. Money I didn't have. That night, after she'd gone to sleep, I pulled out all my savings, barely $1,500, and took stock of the few valuable things I had left. The gold earrings my late husband had given me, my engagement ring, my father's watch, even the sewing machine I used for extra jobs on weekends. The next day, I went to a pawn shop on Clark Street. One by one, I pawned my most precious belongings. The man behind the counter looked at me with pity as I nervously explained I needed the money to send my daughter to study abroad. And does she know? The man, an older gentleman with thick glasses, asked me. No, I replied. And she doesn't need to. When I came home with the envelope full of cash, Jessica screamed with joy, hugged me, and told me I was the best mom in the world. But she never asked where the money came from. She never noticed my earrings were gone, or that I no longer wore her grandfather's watch. During the 6 months she was in Madrid, I worked double shifts to send her extra money every 2 weeks. I ate 1 meal a day, walked 2 miles to save on bus fare, and slept barely 4 hours so I could do sewing jobs late into the night. When she returned, she came back with suitcases full of European clothes, expensive gifts, and hundreds of photos from fancy restaurants and famous museums. She told me all about her adventures while I listened. Happy to see her so radiant, so cultured, so sophisticated. Mom, she said to me that night, I think I finally understand what it means to be an independent woman. In Madrid, I learned that we can't depend on anyone but ourselves. The irony. Now, sitting in this cafe, watching my daughter ask me for another $20,000 without a shred of consideration for my situation, I wondered if she had ever truly seen me as anything more than her personal ATM. So, what do you say, Mom? Can you help me with the down payment? I gently touched my old purse, feeling the rectangular shape of the envelope through the worn leather. The envelope that held my winning ticket, my unexpected salvation, my chance to change the rules of a game I had always lost. Let me think about it, honey, I finally said. She frowned. Think about it? Mom, you've never said that to me before. Is everything okay? For the first time in years, I looked her directly in the eye. Yes, Jessica, everything is perfectly fine. That afternoon, after the cafe, I went back to my 1-bedroom apartment in Logan Square. The L train dropped me off at the corner near the convenience store where I'd bought the lottery ticket 3 days earlier, never knowing that little yellow piece of paper would change my life forever. I walked up the 3 flights of cracked concrete stairs, my knees protesting with every step. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the usual silence. A different kind of silence than before, when my husband John was still alive, and the apartment was filled with the sound of his football games and the clatter of his tools as he fixed some broken appliance. Now it was an empty, heavy silence that seemed to swallow even my own breath. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one I'd bought secondhand 20 years ago, and pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably telemarketers, and a text from the electric company reminding me my bill was due in 2 days. Nothing from Jessica. Nothing about Chloe. Nothing to indicate that anyone in this world cared if I had gotten home safely. I checked my calendar. My 73rd birthday was in 4 days. Last year I had waited until 11 p.m. for a call, a text, a sign that my daughter remembered the date. Finally, at 11:47 p.m., and I received an automated notification from Facebook wishing me a happy birthday. Not even a personal message. This year would be the same, I knew. I went to the kitchen and put water on to boil for some chamomile tea. While I waited, I opened the drawer where I kept my old photographs. The ones Jessica always told me to digitize, as if it were so easy for someone my age to learn that modern technology. There they were, Jessica as a baby in my arms, toothless and smiling at 6, at her high school graduation with that look full of dreams, on her wedding day when she still hugged me with genuine affection. In every photo, I looked thinner, more tired, more worn down by the years of relentless work. I found one particular photo that made my hands tremble. It was from the day Jessica got appendicitis when she was 12. She'd had emergency surgery and had to stay in the hospital for a week. I slept on the hospital floor every night, on a piece of cardboard I found in the parking lot, because the chairs were too uncomfortable, and I couldn't afford an extra bed. In the photo, taken by a kind nurse, I'm holding Jessica's hand while she sleeps. My face shows the exhaustion of not having slept in 3 days, of having missed work to care for her, of having spent my last few dollars on a taxi to get to the hospital quickly. But it also shows something else. A love so deep, so unconditional, that I would have moved mountains for that little girl. Where had that love gone? At what point had my daughter decided I was more of a burden than a blessing? The phone rang, interrupting my memories. For a moment, my heart leaped, hoping it was Jessica calling to apologize, to say she had reflected on our meeting at the cafe. But it was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered. "Mrs. Helen Miller," said a very professional female voice. "This is Chase Bank calling. We've registered some unauthorized transfers from your savings account. Could you confirm if you authorized a withdrawal of $5,000 yesterday?" My blood ran cold. "Excuse me? A $5,000 withdrawal from your account ending in 4791. Did you authorize it?" That was the account where I kept my life savings. The account for which I had given Jessica a supplementary card years ago, when Mark lost his job and they needed money for basic expenses. A card she never asked me to take back when he found work again. No, I did not authorize any withdrawal. I understand. We will proceed to block the account immediately. We'll need you to come to a branch tomorrow morning to file the corresponding report and— I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. Jessica had taken my $5,000 without asking. The last of my savings after years of loans she never repaid. Of emergencies that always turned out to be expenses for her new, lavish lifestyle. I sat down on the kitchen floor and cried. I cried like I hadn't since John's funeral. I cried for the daughter I had lost without even realizing it, for the years I had wasted believing that unconditional love would be enough, for the foolish old woman I had been, blindly trusting the only person I had left in this world. The water was boiling on the stove, but I didn't want tea anymore. I didn't want anything. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, replaying every time Jessica had asked for money, promising to pay it back as soon as I get paid. Every time she had justified her excessive spending as necessary investments. Every time she had made me feel guilty for questioning where my money was going. At 3 a.m, I made a decision. I went to my closet and took out an old shoebox where I kept all my important documents. I searched until I found what I needed: the bank statements, the account numbers, the copies of all the transfers I had made over the past 5 years. The list was devastating. It totaled $85,000. $85,000 that I had sent to Jessica's account over the last 5 years. Money from my pension, from extra jobs I took on weekends, from selling the few valuables I had left. $85,000 she had spent without a single thank you, without a single call to ask how I was doing, without a single visit that wasn't to ask for more money. The next morning, I was at the bank as soon as it opened. I canceled Jessica's supplementary card and put a security code on my account that only I knew. The teller, a kind young man, explained that the withdrawn money couldn't be recovered, but that my account would be protected from now on. "Do you want us to report the unauthorized use of the card?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. Reporting my own daughter for theft. The idea turned my stomach, but it also made me realize something terrible. That's exactly what she had done. She had stolen from me. No, I finally said, but I wanted on record that I canceled the card due to unauthorized use. I left the bank feeling strangely liberated and absolutely terrified at the same time. For the first time in decades, my money was my own. For the first time in years, no one else had access to my accounts. That afternoon, my phone blew up. "Mom, what did you do? My card isn't working. I have a full cart of groceries and I can't pay. This is ridiculous." I didn't answer the first call, nor the second, nor the third. On the fourth call, I finally picked up. "Hello? Mom? Why aren't you answering? My card is blocked. The cashier told me to call the bank and they said you canceled it. Have you lost your mind?" "Jessica," I said, with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Yesterday you took $5,000 from my account without asking me. So what? It's your money. We've always managed the accounts together. You can't just cut off my access like this." "Yes, I can." And I did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, look, if this is about the cafe yesterday, you know I sometimes say things without thinking. But you can't punish me like this. I have responsibilities. I have expenses. And I am 72 years old and have expenses of my own. But you don't need that much money. You don't go out. You don't travel. You don't buy anything. I have a family to support." Those words were the final slap. According to my daughter, I didn't need money because I didn't have a life, because I didn't deserve to spend it on myself, because my only function was to finance the life she did deserve to live. "Jessica," I said, once again touching the envelope inside my old purse, "from now on, you're going to have to live on what you and Mark earn. I am no longer funding your lifestyle. You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. I need you." "You need me," I repeated slowly, "but you don't respect me." And I hung up. For the first time in decades, after hanging up the phone, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel the need to call her back and apologize. I didn't feel like I had to fix things. I just felt peace. The next 3 days were a silent war waged through text messages, missed calls, and unexpected appearances at my door. Jessica had mobilized the entire family against me, as if I were the villain in a story where she was the innocent victim. The first soldier she sent was Mark, her husband. He showed up at my apartment on Wednesday afternoon with that fake smile he had perfected over the 10 years he'd been married to my daughter. Tall, with his hair perfectly styled with gel, and wearing a brand-name shirt I had probably paid for without knowing it. "Helen," he said in that syrupy voice he used when he needed something. "Can we talk?" I let him in, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to shut the door. He sat in my living room as if he owned it, discreetly observing the old furniture, the walls that needed painting, the 15-year-old television that only worked if you hit it on the left side. "Look, Helen," he began, using the condescending tone he'd learned in his sales job. "I know there was a misunderstanding with Jessica the other day. You know how she is. She sometimes speaks without thinking. But she's very sorry." "Sorry for what exactly?" I asked, remaining standing while he made himself comfortable in my armchair like a king granting an audience. "Well, about the purse thing. I already told her that was wrong. A woman should carry whatever makes her feel comfortable regardless of what others think." How funny. He didn't mention a word about the $85,000 or the insults, or being treated like a servant for years. He only apologized for the purse, as if that were the only problem. "Mark," I said, not losing the calm I'd found since I took control of my money. "Tell my daughter that if she wants to talk to me, she can come herself. She doesn't need to send messengers." His smile faltered for a second, revealing the frustration hidden behind his act. "Helen, let's be realistic. You two are both very emotional right now. Jessica is worried because you canceled her card so suddenly. We have expenses, commitments." "Expenses?" I interrupted. "Are you referring to the $5,000 she took from my account without asking?" For the first time since he arrived, Mark looked uncomfortable. He shifted in the armchair and avoided my gaze. "Well, she thought it wouldn't be a problem. You've always managed your finances together. It was just a misunderstanding. A $5,000 misunderstanding. Look, Helen." His voice began to show impatience. "Let's be adults here. You live alone? You don't have big expenses, and we have a child to support. A mortgage. Real responsibilities. It's only natural that the money flows where it's needed most. Real responsibilities. I repeated his words slowly. So, my expenses aren't real? My food, my medication, my utilities aren't real responsibilities? No, that's not what I meant. He stammered, realizing he'd revealed too much of what he really thought. What I'm saying is, we can come to an agreement. Jessica promises to be more considerate, and you could reactivate the card. Just for emergencies. I finally sat down, not because I wanted to be comfortable, but because I needed to process the audacity of this man who had come to my home to emotionally blackmail me into continuing to finance his life of luxury. You know what, Mark? I'm going to be very clear with you. The card stays canceled. Permanently. If Jessica wants to talk to me, she can come alone and she can come to truly apologize, not to send emissaries. He stood up abruptly, and for a moment I saw a flash of the real person behind the friendly facade. You're making a mistake, Helen. Family is family. You can't just cut ties like this. I'm not cutting ties, I said, walking him to the door. I'm setting boundaries. The next day, it was my sister-in-law Susan's turn, John's sister. She arrived carrying a store-bought coffee cake, and that exaggerated expression of concern people put on when they want to meddle in other people's business. Helen, honey, she said, hugging me so tightly she almost choked me with her cheap perfume. I came as soon as I heard. I can't believe you fought with Jessica. I let her in because Susan had been good to me when John died, but I immediately suspected this visit was no coincidence. Who told you I fought with Jessica? I asked as I put on some coffee. Oh, well, she called me yesterday, crying. She told me everything, that you yelled at her, that you cut off her card, that you said horrible things to her. An interesting version of events. In Jessica's story, I was the aggressor who had, unprovoked, attacked an innocent, self-sacrificing daughter. And did she tell you why I canceled the card? Susan settled at the kitchen table, cutting the cake with the familiarity of someone who feels right at home. Look, Helen, I know money can sometimes cause problems in families, but Jessica is your only daughter. She's all you have left of John. You can't let pride destroy that relationship. Pride? I sat across from her, feeling indignation begin to boil in my stomach. Susan, do you have any idea how much money I've given Jessica in the last 5 years? Oh, honey, it's not about keeping score. $85,000. She fell silent, her fork halfway to her mouth. $85,000 that I took from my pension, from extra jobs, from selling the few valuables I had left. And last Monday, I discovered she had taken another $5,000 without telling me. But it must have been an emergency. An emergency? Susan, she earns 3 times what I do. Her husband has a stable job. What emergency justifies stealing from your 72-year-old mother? Susan put her fork down and looked at me with the eyes of someone realizing the problem is more complicated than they thought. Helen, I had no idea it was that much money. No one knew, because I never complained. I never kept score out loud. I never threw all my sacrifices in my daughter's face. But I can't do it anymore, Susan. I can't keep being the personal bank for a daughter who treats me like her employee. She finished her cake in uncomfortable silence. Before leaving, she hugged me with less enthusiasm than when she arrived. Give her time, Helen. Sometimes mothers and daughters need space to understand each other. And what if she doesn't want to understand? I asked. Susan had no answer for that. On Friday came the final assault, Chloe. My 6-year-old granddaughter appeared at my door in her school uniform, her eyes red from crying and wearing the expression children get when they've been coached to manipulate adults. Grandma, she said in a trembling voice, why don't you love Mommy anymore? My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Jessica had been cruel enough to use her own daughter as an emotional weapon against me. Sweetheart, I said, kneeling to be at her level, I will always love your mommy. But sometimes adults have disagreements that have nothing to do with love. But Mommy says you're mad because she said your purse was ugly, and that's why you won't help us with money anymore. There it was. The simplified version Jessica had fed her daughter to make me look like a spiteful old woman, punishing the entire family for a trivial criticism. Chloe, my purse is old. That's true, but I'm not mad about that. Then why is Mommy crying all the time? Why does she say we might not be able to live in our house anymore? Drama. Pure drama designed to break me emotionally. Jessica had turned her 6-year-old daughter into her messenger of emotional blackmail. My love, I said, hugging her tightly. Your mommy and daddy are going to be perfectly fine. They have good jobs and can take care of you without any problems. Don't you worry about grown-up things. But will you still be my grandma? That question destroyed me. Of course, sweetie. I will always be your grandma. No matter what happens with your mom, you will always be the most important thing to me. After Chloe left, obviously dropped off by Jessica, who had waited around the corner for her to complete her mission, I sat in my armchair and cried with rage. They had used an innocent child to try to break my resistance. They had filled my granddaughter with anxiety and confusion to pressure me back into being the bottomless source of money I had been for so many years. That night, I took out my old purse and touched the envelope inside. My winning ticket, my ace in the hole, my chance to forever change the power dynamic in this family that had turned me into their personal ATM. For the first time in days, I smiled. It was time they learned who was really in control. On Monday morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. I was in no hurry to get anywhere. I didn't have to rush to the bank to make urgent transfers. I didn't have to check my phone for Jessica's daily call about some new financial emergency that required my immediate attention and my ever-open wallet. I stayed in bed for a full hour, something I hadn't done since John was alive. I listened to the sounds of the morning filtering through my window, the street vendors calling out, the kids on their way to school, the constant hum of traffic on Western Avenue, the sounds of normal life I had been too busy to notice for years. When I finally got up, I made myself a proper breakfast. 2 scrambled eggs, a side of beans, warm tortillas, and real coffee, brewed with cinnamon, the way my mother taught me. Not the instant coffee I'd been drinking for months to save money. For the first time in a long time, breakfast tasted like more than just survival. After eating, I went to the bank. Not to transfer money to someone else's account, but for a task I had been putting off for years. Opening a savings account exclusively for me, an account where no one else had access, where I could deposit my lottery winnings without anyone knowing they existed. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," greeted the teller who had helped me cancel Jessica's card last week. "How can we help you today?" "I want to cash this," I said, pulling the envelope from my old purse, the one I had carried like a talisman for a week. When he saw the lottery ticket and verified the numbers on his computer, his expression changed completely. His eyes went wide, and he immediately called his supervisor. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice now filled with a sudden respect. "This ticket is the grand prize winner. $1.3 million. $1.3 million. Hearing the figure said aloud by someone else, the reality of what I had won hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. "What do I need to do?" I asked, trying to stay calm as my heart hammered against my ribs. The process was surprisingly simple. Verifications, signatures, forms. In less than 2 hours, I had a new account with an amount of money I had never dreamed of possessing. Money that was entirely mine, with no joint account holders, no shared access, no possibility of anyone else touching it without my explicit permission. When I left the bank, I walked through the streets of my neighborhood like a new person. I passed the local market where I had bought fruits and vegetables for decades, always picking the cheapest ones, the ones on the verge of spoiling. Today, for the first time, I bought what I wanted to eat, not what I could afford. Ripe, sweet mangoes, perfect avocados, firm red tomatoes. The woman at the checkout looked at me strangely when I paid without haggling, without asking if she had anything cheaper, without counting and recounting my change. "Are you all right, Helen?" asked Lupita, who had been selling me vegetables for 15 years. "You look different." "I'm wonderful, Lupita. Better than ever." That afternoon, I sat in my living room, surrounded by grocery bags full of real food, and for the first time in years, I thought about myself. Not what Jessica needed, not how I was going to stretch my Social Security to cover someone else's expenses, not what excuse I was going to invent this time to justify why I couldn't give her more money. I thought about me. What did I want to do? What had I been putting off for years because I didn't have the resources, because all my money went elsewhere, because my entire life revolved around being useful to my daughter? The answer came immediately. I wanted to travel. Ever since John died, I had dreamed of visiting Santa Fe, of seeing the ancient cliff dwellings, of walking the streets lined with art galleries and beautiful Native American crafts. But I never could, because every extra dollar immediately became a loan for Jessica, a family emergency, a need more urgent than my own dreams. Now I could go. I could go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without asking anyone's permission, without having to justify the expense, without feeling guilty for spending money on myself. That evening, as I made dinner with the fresh ingredients I had bought, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "Mom." Her voice sounded different, less demanding, more cautious. "Can we talk?" "We are talking." "No, I mean, can I come see you? I need to talk to you in person." Something in her tone intrigued me. It wasn't the desperate urgency of last week, nor the indignation of someone who feels unjustly treated. It was something more calculated. "Fine. Come tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow? Can I come now?" "Tomorrow afternoon, Jessica." For the first time in my life, I had set my own terms for a conversation with my daughter. She could come, but on my schedule, under my conditions. The next day, Jessica arrived on time, something she rarely did when she depended on my money. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, probably new and expensive, and she brought flowers. Flowers she had likely bought 5 minutes before arriving, but flowers nonetheless. "Mom," she said, hugging me with an affection she hadn't shown in years. "I've missed you so much." "Sit down," I said, not returning the hug with the same intensity. She sat on the sofa, immediately noticing the grocery bags I'd left on the kitchen counter, the fresh food visible through the plastic. "I see you went to the market," she commented, trying to sound casual. "You bought a lot." "Yes. I was hungry for real food." There was an awkward silence. Jessica shifted on the sofa, clearly steeling herself for what she had come to say. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking this week. About us, about what happened." I waited silently. "I know I've been hard on you. I know I sometimes say things without thinking, and I hurt you without meaning to. It's not my intention, but I know I do it." It was the beginning of an apology, but something in her delivery made me suspect there was more. "And?" I prompted. "And I want you to know that I value everything you've done for me, all the money you've lent me, all the help you've given me. I know I haven't always thanked you properly." "Lent me." I repeated the word slowly. "Lent?" She blushed slightly. "Well, given. What you've given me. Go on. The point is, I want things to change between us. I want us to have a better relationship. I want Chloe to have a grandmother who is present in her life." It all sounded very nice, very rehearsed, very convenient. But there was something she wasn't saying, something I could see in her eyes. "Jessica," I said, leaning forward. "What do you need?" Her expression subtly shifted. There it was. The real reason for her visit. "Well, since you asked, Mark lost his job last Friday." There it was. The real emergency. The real reason she had come with flowers and apologies. And, well, we're going to be in a tough spot for a while, until he finds something new." She waited for me to say something, to immediately offer help as I had for so many years. But this time, I remained silent. "Mom, I know you canceled my card, and I understand why you did it, but this is different. This is a real emergency. How much do you need?" Her eyes lit up, thinking she had won. $10,000, just to get us through the next few months while Mark looks for work. I promise. This time I'll pay you back. $10,000. Just like that. As if it were an insignificant amount I could produce from thin air. As if my entire life hadn't been an endless succession of emergencies that always ended up emptying my accounts to fill hers. I got up from my chair and went to the kitchen. I took an apple from one of the grocery bags and cut it into small pieces, taking my time while she waited for my answer. "No," I said finally. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not giving you $10,000, Jessica." Her face transformed instantly. The mask of the repentant daughter vanished, and the woman who had humiliated me in the cafe reappeared. "Are you crazy? It's an emergency." "It's your emergency, not mine. I'm your daughter, and I'm your mother. Not your employee, not your bank, not your bottomless well of money." She stood up abruptly, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "I can't believe how selfish you're being, after everything I've done for you." "What have you done for me, Jessica?" I asked, with a calm that surprised even myself. "When was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you visited me without needing money? When was the last time you treated me like your mother and not your ATM?" She had no answer for that. "I'm leaving," she said, heading for the door. "When you change your mind, you know my number." "Jessica," I called out before she left. She turned, expecting me to have reconsidered. "I'm not going to change my mind." The door slammed shut with a bang that rattled the windows. But I didn't move. I didn't run after her. I didn't dial her number to apologize. I stayed in my kitchen, eating my apple in silence, feeling freer than I had in years. The following days were the calm before the storm. I received no calls from Jessica, no text messages, no unexpected visits. For the first time in years, my phone remained silent for hours, and that silence brought not anxiety, but a strange sense of peace. I used those days for something I hadn't done in decades, to think about myself. I pulled out my old documents, my photos from my youth, the letters John wrote me when we were dating. I reconnected with the woman I was before I became the official provider of other people's dreams. On Thursday afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off for 3 years. I went to a travel agency. "Good morning." A friendly young woman greeted me from behind the counter. "How can I help you?" "I want to go to Santa Fe. A full package. Hotel, meals, tours, all included." Her eyes lit up. "How wonderful. Santa Fe is beautiful this time of year. When are you planning to travel?" "Next week?" She looked at me, surprised. Most people my age planned their trips months in advance, checking and rechecking every expense, every detail. "Next week? Perfect. Let me see what we have available." In an hour, I had booked a suite in a historic hotel downtown, tours to ancient ruins and artists' villages, a southwestern cooking class, and even a spa day, all paid for in advance from my new bank account. All for me. When I left the agency, my tickets and confirmations in hand, I felt like a child on the first day of summer vacation. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to do something completely for myself, completely for my own enjoyment. That night, as I packed my suitcase with clothes I had bought that afternoon, new, comfortable, pretty clothes, I received a call I wasn't expecting. "Grandma?" It was Chloe. Her voice sounded small and scared. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "Mommy's crying a lot, and Daddy is really mad. He says you hate us and that's why you won't help us anymore." My heart sank. They were using my granddaughter again, filling her little head with confusion and pain to pressure me. "Chloe, honey, where are you right now?" "In my room. Mommy doesn't know I'm calling you." I took her phone. "Listen to me very carefully, my love. I will never, ever stop loving you. You are the most important thing in my life, but your mommy and I have grown-up problems that you don't have to understand or solve. But are you going to fix your problems?" "I don't know, honey. But what I do know is that you and I will always be okay, no matter what happens. Can you come see me?" "Very soon, sweetie. I promise we'll see each other very soon." After I hung up, I cried. I cried for that innocent child paying the price for the adult's conflicts. I cried because I knew this confrontation with Jessica was going to get worse before it got better. I cried because, for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But when I finished crying, I continued packing my suitcase. On Friday night, with everything ready for my trip to Santa Fe, there was an insistent knocking at my door. Not the polite ring of a social call, but loud, desperate bangs. I opened the door to find an entire family emergency committee. Jessica, Mark, my sister-in-law Susan, and even Mark's brother Michael, whom I barely knew. They all looked exhausted and desperate, like soldiers losing a war. "That's enough, Mom," Jessica said, pushing the door open to enter uninvited. "This ends tonight. The others followed her in, filling my small living room with their overwhelming presence. They sat on my furniture like a tribunal, as if I were the one on trial in my own home. "Sit down, Helen," Susan ordered me with the voice of someone who believes they have moral authority. "We need to talk. Seriously." "I'm fine standing," I replied, holding my ground by the door. "Look, Helen," Mark began with that salesman's voice that no longer worked on me. "This has gotten out of hand. Jessica told me what happened the other day, and frankly, I think you're being very unfair." "Unfair?" "Yes, unfair," Michael chimed in, inserting himself into a conversation that wasn't his. "Family is family. You don't shut the door on your own daughter when she's going through a tough time." "Tough times?" I cut them off. "Are you referring to the difficulty of maintaining a standard of living you can't afford without my money?" "Helen," Susan interjected condescendingly, "I understand you feel used, but that's what mothers do. They sacrifice for their children. It's natural." "Natural? Is it natural for a 40-year-old daughter to steal from her 72-year-old mother?" "I didn't steal anything," Jessica exploded. "You gave me that card. We've always managed the money together. $85,000, Jessica, in 5 years. Does that sound like managing money together?" Silence filled the room. It was clear she had never told them the real amount. 85, what? Susan murmured, her eyes wide. $85,000. I repeated slowly, plus the $5,000 she took without telling me last week. Almost $90,000 that came from my Social Security, my extra jobs, from selling my belongings. Mark looked uncomfortable, as if he'd arrived at a war without knowing the true cause of the conflict. "Well," Susan said, trying to regain control of the conversation, "that's water under the bridge. The important thing now is to fix things and move forward as a family." "Fix things?" I walked over to where my sister-in-law was sitting. "Susan, have you ever lent $85,000 to one of your children?" "Well, my children haven't needed—" "Exactly, because your children learn to live on what they earn." I turned to Jessica, who was avoiding my gaze. "Jessica, can you tell me the last time you visited just to see how I was? The last time you asked if I needed anything? The last time you treated me like your mother and not your employee? That's not fair," she muttered. "Not fair? You know what's not fair, honey? That you humiliated me in that cafe over my old purse. The same purse I carried for years while working to pay for your college, to pay for your trip to Madrid, to pay for everything you ever wanted and never once appreciated." I went to my kitchen and returned with a shoebox. I placed it on the coffee table in front of them all. "Do you know what's in here?" I asked, opening the box. "Every transfer I've made to you. Every receipt. All the evidence of 5 years of gifting you money I needed for my own expenses." I pulled out the papers one by one, reading the dates and amounts aloud. "March 2019, $5,000 for the down payment on Mark's car. May 2019, $3,000 for your vacation to Cancun. August 2019, $6,000 for that master's degree you never finished." "Stop it!" Jessica shouted, jumping to her feet. "We get it. You gave us money. But that's what mothers do." "And what do daughters do, Jessica?" I yelled back, with a strength I didn't know I had. "What do daughters do for their mothers?" She was silent. "I'll tell you what you're going to do from now on," I continued, my voice now calm, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos in the room. "You are going to live on what you and your husband earn. You are going to raise your daughter without my money. You are going to learn to value what you have instead of always asking for more. And if I don't want to?" she challenged, with that teenage attitude she had never outgrown. I stepped closer until we were face to face. "Then I won't have a daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared at me as if I had uttered a blasphemy, as if I had broken some natural law that dictated mothers must endure any abuse to keep the family together. "You can't say that," Mark whispered. "Yes, I can. And I am. Jessica, you have a chance to truly be my daughter. A daughter who respects me, who values me, who loves me without financial conditions. Or you can continue to be what you have been. A stranger who only looks for me when she needs money." "Mom," her voice cracked slightly, "the decision is yours, honey. but what you will not continue to do is treat me like your personal bank." One by one, they all began to get up to leave. Susan shot me a reproachful look, as if I were the one responsible for destroying the family's harmony. Mark avoided my gaze completely. Michael muttered something about difficult women on his way out. Jessica was the last to leave. She stopped at the door and looked at me with a mixture of rage and something that might have been sadness. "You're going to regret this, Mom." "No, honey. I regret taking so long to do it." When they were gone, I sat in my armchair, surrounded by the deepest silence I had experienced in years. But it wasn't a sad silence. It was the silence of freedom. I looked at my suitcase, packed and ready for Santa Fe, my plane tickets on the table, my new life waiting for me. For the first time in decades, the future was entirely my own. The flight to Santa Fe was my first flight in 30 years. The last time had been to accompany John for a medical treatment in Houston, a trip filled with anxiety and fear. This flight was completely different. I stared out the window like a child seeing the world from the clouds, feeling that every mile that took me away from Chicago was a mile closer to the woman I had forgotten I could be. When I landed in Santa Fe, the air smelled different. Cleaner, freer, scented with aromas I didn't recognize, but that made me feel as if I had come home after a very long exile. The hotel was more beautiful than I had imagined. A historic adobe building turned into a luxury inn with inner courtyards full of vibrant purple bougainvillea, fountains that sang softly, and rooms with high ceilings and hand-carved wooden furniture. My suite had a small balcony overlooking the cathedral, and when I first stepped out, it took my breath away. "Welcome to Santa Fe, Mrs. Miller," the receptionist, a young woman with a genuine smile, told me. "We hope you enjoy your stay." "Thank you," I replied, feeling how those two simple words carried an emotional weight she couldn't possibly understand. It was the first time in years someone had welcomed me somewhere without expecting something in return. That first night, I had dinner alone at the hotel restaurant. I ordered green chili stew, tamales, artisanal tequila, and a piñon nut dessert that tasted like heaven. I didn't have to worry about the price. I didn't have to split the bill. I didn't have to pretend I wasn't hungry to save money. For the first time in decades, I ate because I wanted to eat. What I wanted to eat. When I wanted to eat it. The waiter, an older man with hands weathered by work, asked if I was visiting alone. "Yes," I said, expecting the pitying look that answer usually provoked. But he smiled with approval. "How brave, ma'am. At your age, setting out to see new places on your own. That says a lot about you." Brave? No one had ever called me brave. Responsible, yes. Self-sacrificing, certainly. But never brave. The following days were a continuous revelation. I visited the ancient cliff dwellings at sunrise, as the ruins emerged from the mist like monuments to civilizations that had known how to value what truly mattered. I walked through markets where weavers patiently explained the meanings of each color, each pattern, each story woven into their southwestern textiles. In the village of Chimayo, an older woman named Esperanza taught me how to dye wool with cochineal, the insect that produces the most beautiful red in the world. "Look, Helen," she said as she stirred the wool in the boiling dye. "Each color has its time, its process. You can't rush it. The cochineal has to give up its color when it's ready, not before." Her words resonated in my soul in ways she couldn't imagine. I, too, had been waiting for my time, my process, my moment to show my true colors. "Do you live alone?" I asked her while we waited for the wool to absorb the dye. "Yes, since my husband passed 5 years ago. At first, I thought I would die of sadness, but then I discovered something beautiful." "What was that?" "I discovered who I was without having to take care of anyone else. And I liked the woman I found. That night, on my hotel balcony, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote about myself. Not a to-do list for other people, not a budget calculating how much I could give Jessica. I wrote about what I had felt that day, about the colors I had seen, about the feeling of walking on cobblestone streets with no rush, no specific destination, just for the pleasure of walking. On the 4th day of my stay, as I was sipping coffee in the main plaza, watching children play and elderly couples walk hand in hand, my phone rang. Mom? It was Jessica, but her voice sounded different, less demanding, smaller. Hello, honey. Where are you? I went to your apartment and you're not there. I'm in Santa Fe. There was a long silence. Santa Fe? What are you doing there? I'm on vacation. On vacation? Her voice went up an octave, as if I'd told her I was on Mars. Alone? Yes, alone. And it's wonderful. Another silence. I could hear her confusion through the phone. The idea that her mother could be living independently, enjoying life without her, was a concept that didn't fit into her reality. Mom, we need to talk. When you get back, what do you want to talk about? About everything. About us. About what happened. There was something different in her voice. It wasn't the desperate urgency for money, nor the calculated manipulation. It sounded like she had understood something. All right, honey. When I get back, we can talk. When are you coming back? Sunday. I miss you. Those 3 words brought tears to my eyes, because they sounded sincere for the first time in years. I miss you too, Jessica. After hanging up, I stayed in the cafe, finishing my cup as I watched the life of Santa Fe pass before me. Families strolling on a Sunday, grandparents carrying grandchildren, young mothers buying flowers from street vendors. Normal life, simple life, a life lived without constant drama. That evening, I attended a traditional dance performance in an outdoor theater. The dancers told stories of heritage, of resilience, of people who had preserved their identity despite centuries of pressure to change, to adapt, to sacrifice who they were for what others needed them to be. When the lead dancer performed a piece representing a woman breaking free from the invisible chains of family expectations, I cried. I cried without shame, without trying to hide my tears, without worrying about what the strangers sitting around me might think. I cried for the woman I had been, for the years lost funding someone else's dreams while my own withered in neglect. But I also cried with gratitude, because I had found the courage to change, because it wasn't too late, because at 72 years old, I had discovered that I still had time to be happy. I spent my last day in Santa Fe at the hotel spa, massages with aromatic oils, a volcanic clay facial, time in the hot tub looking out at the mountains surrounding the city. Luxuries I had never allowed myself, acts of self-care I had never considered necessary for a woman my age. The massage therapist, a young woman with magical hands, said something to me as she worked on the knots of tension I had carried on my shoulders for decades. Ma'am, your body is very tense, as if you've been carrying a weight that wasn't yours to carry. That's right, I replied. But not anymore. The flight back to Chicago was different from the flight out. It was not an escape, but a return. I was returning as the same woman, but with a fundamental difference. Now I knew who I was without the need to be useful to others. I knew I could be happy on my own. I knew my worth didn't depend on how much money I could give my daughter. When the plane landed in Chicago, and I saw the familiar skyline of my hometown, I felt a mix of nostalgia and hope. I was coming home, but to a different kind of home. A home where I would set the rules, where I would decide who entered and on what terms. When I arrived at my apartment, I found a bouquet of flowers at my door. Fresh, expensive flowers, with a handwritten card. Mom, welcome home. Can we talk? Love, Jessica. It wasn't the kind of apology I had been expecting, but it was a start. I went into my apartment and saw it with new eyes. The old furniture, the walls that needed painting, the chipped dishes. Everything was the same as when I left, but I was completely different. I took out my suitcase and began to unpack slowly, savoring each memory of Santa Fe, the woven blanket I had bought in Chimayo, the photos of the cliff dwellings, the artisanal tequila I planned to enjoy on quiet evenings. My phone rang. It was Jessica. Mom, are you home? Yes, I just got here. Did you see the flowers? Yes, they're beautiful. Thank you. Can we talk tomorrow? There are things I need to tell you. For the first time in years, I felt no anxiety at the prospect of a conversation with my daughter. I didn't worry about what she might ask for, about how I would say no, about whether I would have the strength to maintain my boundaries. All right, honey. Come by tomorrow afternoon. That night, as I prepared chamomile tea with herbs I'd bought at the Santa Fe market, I looked at myself in my kitchen mirror. The woman looking back had the same wrinkles, the same gray hair, the same hands weathered by the years. But there was something different in her eyes. There was strength. There was peace. There was recovered dignity. For the first time in decades, I liked what I saw in the mirror. The woman I had lost somewhere between being a wife, a mother, and a provider had returned. And this time, she was here to stay. Jessica arrived on time Monday afternoon. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes, but a simple dress I recognized from years ago. Her demanding attitude was also gone. When I opened the door, she hugged me with an intensity I hadn't felt since she was a child. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "you look different." "I feel different," I replied, leading her into the living room. She sat on the sofa where she had so often come to ask for money, but now her hands were empty. She wasn't carrying bank statements or unpaid bills or manufactured emergencies. She just brought herself. "Mom, these last few days you were gone. Mark and I had to face our financial reality without your help. And how did that go?" "It was hard. Really hard. We had to cancel services we thought were necessary. We had to change our lifestyle. We had to explain to Chloe why she couldn't continue her expensive ballet classes." I waited in silence, giving her space to continue. "But it was also revealing. I realized we had been living a life we couldn't sustain without your money. A life that wasn't really ours." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears she'd shed during our previous fights. These seemed sincere. "Mom, I want to apologize. Not just for the money, but for how I've treated you, for what I said in the cafe, for making you feel like a burden, for taking everything you did for me for granted." I sat across from her, studying her face. There was a genuineness in her expression I hadn't seen in years. "Go on," I said softly. "Susan told me how much money it really was. $85,000. Mom, I had never added it all up. I never realized the scale of your sacrifices. And now that you know, now I understand why you were so tired all the time. Why your clothes were so old. Why you never bought anything for yourself. Why you were always worried about money. You were funding our dreams while your own ran out of budget." I touched my old purse, which was on the coffee table between us. The same purse she had despised in the cafe. The one she had called a filthy rag. "Jessica, do you remember this purse?" She looked at it with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Yes, the purse I hate. Do you know why I keep it?" "Because you're stubborn and won't buy a new one." "No." I opened the purse and took out something I had kept there since my return from Santa Fe. An old black and white photo, worn with age. "Because this purse was with me the day I brought you home from the hospital." I showed her the photograph. It was me, so much younger, leaving the hospital with her in my arms, carrying this very purse. "This purse was with me when I sold baked goods on the street to pay for your school, when I worked double shifts to buy you new clothes, when I pawned my jewelry to send you to Madrid." Her tears began to fall more heavily. "This purse held the money for your first communion, the savings for your graduation, the counted bills for your wedding dress. It's not just an old purse, honey. It's the story of everything I did out of love for you." "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. "And when you told me it was embarrassing, when you were ashamed of it in the cafe, you weren't despising an object. You were despising the story of my love for you." She leaned forward and touched the purse with a reverence she had never shown before. "I didn't know. I never thought about it like that. I know, honey, and I forgive you." "You forgive me?" "I forgive you because now I understand something it took me 72 years to learn. I can't make you value my sacrifices. I can tell you my story, but I can't force you to feel gratitude. That has to come from you." Jessica got off the sofa and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. "Mom, I want you to know I've made some decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "Mark and I are selling the new car and buying a used one. We're moving to a smaller, cheaper apartment. I'm going to find a part-time job to supplement our income." "And why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that we are not going to depend on your money anymore. Ever again. I want it to be clear that when I come to visit, it will be because I want to see you, not because I need something from you." I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Not because a financial responsibility was gone, but because for the first time my daughter was treating me as a person with her own value, not just as a resource. And Chloe? How will she take all these changes? I've already talked to her. I explained that we're going to live more simply, but that we'll be closer as a family. And she asked me something that broke my heart. What did she ask? She asked if we were going to be happy now like Grandma, who's always smiling when she comes to visit. That sentence filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in years. My granddaughter perceived me as happy. Despite all my problems, despite the financial difficulties, she saw me as a source of joy. There's something else, Jessica continued. I want you to come with us next weekend. Chloe wants to show you a drawing she made of you in Santa Fe. A drawing of me in Santa Fe? I told her you had traveled alone, and she was fascinated. She drew her adventurous grandma discovering new places. She wants to be like you when she grows up. I started to laugh, a genuine laugh that came from deep within me. My granddaughter wanted to be like me, an independent, brave woman, capable of creating her own happiness. I would love to come see her. Mom, there's something I've never told you. What is it? I've always admired you, even when I was treating you horribly, even when I didn't show it. I always knew you were the strongest woman I knew, but I think I was afraid to admit it, because it meant confronting everything I wasn't. And what weren't you? I wasn't grateful. I wasn't independent. I wasn't strong. I had built my entire life depending on your strength, your generosity, your inability to say no to me. But that's changed now. Yes, Mom, that's changed. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. Not about money, not about problems, not about emergencies. We talked about my days in Santa Fe, her plans to simplify her life, Chloe and her antics, and beautiful memories we had shared when she was little. When she left, she hugged me again with that genuine intensity, but this time she added something she hadn't said in years. I love you, Mom. I really love you. I love you too, honey. That night, after she was gone, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea I'd brought from Santa Fe and looked at the stars over Chicago. I thought about the entire journey I had taken since that terrible morning in the cafe when Jessica was ashamed of my old purse. I now understood that humiliation had been necessary. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, the moment that forced me to confront a toxic relationship I had been accepting out of a misguided sense of love. My old purse was still on the table, within reach. I touched it gently, lovingly. Thank you, I whispered to it. Thank you for carrying not just my things, but my story. Thank you for holding up all these years so I could learn this lesson. 3 months later, Jessica kept her word. They sold the car, moved to a more modest apartment, and she found a job at an elementary school. Chloe adapted to her new life with the beautiful flexibility of children, and her visits to my house became more frequent and more genuine. I continued to travel. I went to Savannah, to New Orleans, to the coast of Maine. Each trip taught me something new about myself, about the woman who had been dormant for so many years. My old purse came with me everywhere. I no longer saw it as a symbol of poverty or limitation. I saw it for what it truly was, a faithful companion that had held not just my belongings, but my dignity, my history, and finally, my freedom. And now, when someone asks why I don't buy a new purse, I tell them this story. I tell them about a woman who confused love with money, who confused being a mother with being an ATM, who confused sacrifice with servitude. I tell them how an old purse became the symbol of a personal revolution, of how at 72 years old I discovered it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, because sometimes the oldest, most worn-out things, the things most despised by others, are the ones that hold the most valuable stories. And sometimes, what others see as poverty, we know is a wealth of experience, strength of character, and rediscovered freedom. This old purse is no longer ugly to me. It's beautiful, because it's mine, because it carries my story, and because it taught me the most important lesson of my life, that my value doesn't depend on what I can give to others, but on who I am when no one is asking me for anything. And that woman, the one I discovered at 72, is someone I am deeply proud of. Have you ever experienced something similar? Do you know someone who confused love with money, like I did for so many years? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Because these stories need to reach other women who, like me, may be waiting for their moment to say enough and start living for themselves. Sometimes the thing that was most humiliated is the thing that finally rises the highest.